Welcome to Evil Done Badly, the dumbest true crime podcast on the internet. We have a weird show for you this week, and this is a very sad one. I'm not sure this episode will live up to our usual virtuosic level of stupidity. This story is truly tragic, but rest assured, you will not feel any smarter after you listen to it. We will dig deep into idiocy and do our best to make it moronic, while also doing our best not to downplay the plight of the victims. I mean, it's never my intention to poke fun at or insult the victims or their families. But I am here to berate and insult the cunts who we cover on this horrible show. And, well, I think we do a pretty adequate job of doing so. Now, on this episode, we're going to be covering a cunt from my hometown here in Eastern Canada. And I mean, if you're just joining us, if you've never listened to an episode before, and you're wondering why my voice is so annoying, well, that's why. I'm from very Eastern Canada. We do not have the sexiest accents in the world, which is why, well, very few of us are successful podcasters. Now, Shirley Turner here. Now, she was raised in Wichita, Kansas, which is not in Newfoundland, but she went to medical school right here in St. John's, and went on to work at teaching hospitals all across the island. She also does not have the sexiest accent in the world, and I don't think she would be a successful podcast either. But she'd undoubtedly do better in this one. Anyways, speaking of St. John's, I told my dad that I was thinking about getting a fog machine for the video version of this podcast. And that was for some extra ambiance. So he says, "What the hell do you need a fog machine for? We're in Newfoundland. Just open the damn window." And I thought that was a fantastic idea because, well, we don't have anything but fog here. And I mean, apart from the fact it's usually minus 15 degrees here, I mean, that's a great idea, but I'm not going at it. Maybe in the summer I'll let in some real newfie fog and we'll have some genuine atmosphere going on here. But until then, I'll just slap in some fake fog and call it a day. But that's enough about the weather. Let's get into the episode. But before we even do that, I'd like to give a very special thank you to listener Larry G for pointing me in the direction of this crazy-ass newfie bitch. But before we do any of that, before we get started in on Shirley Turner, let's grab a beverage, hold on to our smoking hot arses, and let's take a listen to the theme song. This episode of Evil Done Badly is brought to you by the wide world of paranormal investigations and ridiculous thrifter groups over on Facebook. You know what to do. They're getting crazy popular. You should be in there. So go check these silly pages out. And this week I promised my two kittens I'd plug their new song on the podcast. They've obviously never listened to the podcast. Otherwise, they'd be just as ashamed of me as the rest of my family is. Anyways, taking a listen to this sample.
Sometimes I wanna move my arse and dance. Sometimes I wanna wear glitter purple pants. Sometimes I wanna pet a fuzzy kitten. Sometimes I wanna knit a mitten. I'm so lost inside my joy. Isn't it great to be alive? The world is a beautiful place, a wonderful place to stay.
That was Sometimes I Wanna Dance by Peanut and Pancake. Add it to your cat's favorite playlist on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or any other of your cat's chosen musical platforms. Now back to the show. Andrew Bagby was born in 1973 to David and Kathleen Bagby in Sunnyvale, California. And California is about as far from Memorial University Medical School as you can get and still be on the same continent. There's also a noticeable difference in the climate between the two places. California is California, and I'm told it's quite nice there. Here in St. John's, now, while recording this episode, put it this way, we had 75 centimeters of snow last night. That's one night. It's fucking brutal. I have no idea why poor Andrew decided to come here, but I can't imagine it was for the warm tropical sunshine that we have here on this piece of frozen tundra here in the Atlantic Ocean. Well, the weather sucks, but we do have a bit of a less wholesome reputation, and that reputation attracts quite a few curious visitors. Now, I doubt in this case that it had anything to do with Andrew's reasoning. I mean, he seems way too wholesome to be swayed by our salacious notoriety that we have going on here. The weird thing is, I'm pretty sure there had to be other suitable medical schools in the 6,000 miles or so that separates the two places. And I find it baffling that he wound up here. Regardless, his choice of universities would wind up costing him his life and lead to tragic consequences. So, Andrew grows up in California, moves to Newfoundland to become a doctor, and in 1999 he meets fellow medical student Shirley Turner, and they begin dating. Shirley is 12 years older than Andrew. She has 3 kids and is fuck ugly. So she's got a lot going for her. Her mother was actually from Newfoundland, so it made sense for her to wind up at our medical school. Now, she was raised in Kansas, but she moved back here when her mother divorced her American father and came back to the island. So, Shirley and Andrew are going out, and it doesn't sit that well with Andrew's friends. They find her a bit off-putting and constantly making overtly sexual comments that don't exactly jive with Andrew's normal, wholesome demeanor. It seems like they felt that Andrew was selling himself short and settling a bit for this nasty fucking old idiot. Apparently, Andrew had his heart ripped out of his chest by the last girl he was involved with, deeply involved. And because of this, he didn't have the greatest self-confidence in the world, and I think he felt like a failure, and he didn't feel worthy of love because, well, he felt a little too chubby. Now, I mean, he had a bit of weight on, but that just makes him even more adorable. And it's all very sad. I mean, he seems like a very lovable dude. He's smart. He's a friendly doctor guy. And I wouldn't be surprised, I mean, if he had girls all over him. But he apparently didn't see it that way. So when Shirley comes along, he kind of fell right into her hands and was kind of helpless to fend her off. So they graduate, and in 2001, Andrew takes up a surgical residency in Syracuse, New York. Shirley gets a job in Iowa, and they continue their relationship long distance. Now, Andrew finds that he hates doing surgeries. So, he just moves to a different state. He moves to Pennsylvania to switch his residency over to family practice. And he loves it. His co-workers love him, the patients love him, and he fits right in. He finds his place in the world where he belongs. And unfortunately, Shirley knows where he is. So, she's still in Iowa and becomes increasingly possessive over Andrew. And the two of them argue frequently, as tends to happen. The arguing gets more and more intense as it becomes clear that Andrew has found a new female friend in Pennsylvania. I don't know who this girl was, but I imagine she was less ugly, less old, had less children, and was much less of a psycho bitch than this Shirley person. In the meantime, Shirley has taken up a new hobby, and that hobby is firing her new pistol. I don't know if Andrew knew about this at the time, but I would consider that a red flag in any relationship. This old skank, well, she's becoming unstable. Now, Shirley tells Andrew that she is pregnant with his child in October of 2001. She goes to visit Andrew in Pennsylvania to discuss the matter of the fetus, and to berate him for being involved with a woman who's, well, not her. So things are not going well between them, and she needs to fuck off and go back to, well, anywhere but where Andrew is. Now, you might think that sounds a little heartless of me, knowing that Shirley is with Andrew's child, and maybe they should try and make it work. Well, fuck that. She's not really knocked up, and in November she confesses that she was only pretending to be in a desperate attempt to lure Andrew back to her permanently. So, Andrew is rotted. He has finally had enough of her shit. He breaks it off with her once and for all and slaps her right back on a plane to Iowa. Of course, naturally, Psycho Bitch here is not happy about being stuck on a plane to Iowa against her will. So the next day, she calls Andrew 3 or 4 times to express her displeasure and promptly turns around and drives the 16 hours back to Pennsylvania to continue hassling him. She confronts him on the morning of November 6th and makes him promise to meet with her after work later that night. So Andrew's a little worked up, and he arrives at his job. He's a little shaken, and he tells a friend that he would be meeting with Shirley sometime that night. The friend implores Andrew not to meet with this crazy woman alone, but Andrew dismisses the threat and tells him that he would contact him afterwards to let him know that everything was okay. Andrew left work. Andrew went to meet Shirley. Everything was not okay, and Andrew would never make it to his friend's house. Poor Andrew was found the next day in a parking lot at Keystone State Park. He had been shot 5 times with a .22 caliber pistol. Who do we know has been taking, gun lessons? So the police get involved after they discover the body, and they ask around. And Andrew's co-workers, well, they're all too glad, and they have no problem pointing their fingers at this crazy doctor lady from Iowa. When asked where she was on the day in question, Shirley claims that she had been home in Iowa all day being sick. It's plausible. Well, even in 2001, her cell phone records show that she wasn't homesick. They showed that she was driving across the country in a fit of murderous rage. She had also shopped on eBay and checked her email from Andrew's computer on the day in question. She even used Andrew's home phone to contact her own workplace back in Iowa to call in sick. This is one stupid fucking ugly idiot who somehow made her way through medical school. So her story's falling apart. She says that Andrew put the gun in his trunk and she hadn't seen it since. And if that wasn't horseshit enough, she had already told her firearms instructor that the gun was stolen. This instructor also noticed that her particular gun had a nasty habit of ejecting live rounds when it shouldn't. One of these rounds was found next to Andrew's car in the parking lot. So, she's fucked 4 ways from Friday. It looks like an open and shut case, and that Shirley here is going to be put away for a long time. Poor Andrew is dead at 28, but at least she's going to get what's coming to her. Well, not really. As terrible and as unfair as this whole situation is, it gets worse. Now, before Shirley can be arrested in Pennsylvania, she catches the plane back to Toronto and settles back in St. John somewhere. Now, we may be a frozen rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but we do have a police force, the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, and they were cooperating with Pennsylvanian authorities. They followed her around and took her garbage and stuff, and in the process, they find out that she's really pregnant. Now, it's a bit peculiar here, because she just recently admitted that she wasn't pregnant. So somewhere between thinking that she was only pretending to be pregnant and telling Andrew that she wasn't pregnant, she got pregnant with Andrew's child. Either that or she was lying about lying about her pretending to be knocked up. I don't think that sentence made any sense at all, but it does not matter. All we know is she's a manipulative fucking idiot and completely full of shit. Now, here in St. John's, they do bring her in about a week later and they formally arrest her. Somehow, she is established to not be a threat to society, despite, well, awaiting murder charges back in the States. So she's allowed to walk free, provided she follows a bunch of inconvenient rules and pays $75,000 bail. She doesn't have $75,000, but her former psychiatrist does. And he pays off the bill for her. I mean, he really should have saved his cash. He wound up being fined later on for professional misconduct based on some sort of rule that says you shouldn't be paying your patients' legal bills. It's a bit of a conflict of interest thing and can lead to some weird situations. I have no idea what kind of weird situations I'm talking about, but I'm also not wealthy. I have no money, and I don't understand what rich people spend their money on. But I imagine they buy a whole lot of beverages. So, moving on. So Shirley's out walking around in St. John's a free woman. Sort of. And Andrew's parents, they moved from the States to Newfoundland because they want to try and get custody of Andrew's baby. They don't think that Shirley is fit to look after little Zachary and would much rather that he live with them. Far away from Shirley and her unhinged lunacy. Not to mention that she fucking killed their son. How they control themselves while dealing with this bitch is, well, totally beyond me. I recently saw the documentary Dear Zachary, a letter to a son about his father. And in it, these poor grandparents, they go through absolute hell dealing with this cunt. It's a great documentary. I highly recommend it. And it's fucking heartbreaking. Now, Shirley, as you can imagine, was not very cooperative. She did everything she could to prevent David and Kathleen from having any meaningful contact with Zachary. She was afraid that they might try to kidnap him and run away or something. Which sort of makes sense. According to her, she was only doing what was best for her baby. What little contact they did have with Zachary, though, they made the most of it. And Zachary exhibited a much more vigorous attachment towards the Bagbys than he did towards his mom. Now, I get the feeling that he had already come to the conclusion that she was a fucking piece of shit parent. So, begrudgingly, the Bagbys are way more accommodating to this nutcase than is, well, even humanly possible. I don't know how they did it. But they did try their best to keep things civil in hopes that the courts would eventually side with them and give them custody while Shirley rots away in a prison back in the U.S. They put up with her until November of 2002, when she gets slapped back in jail while they sort out the extradition paperwork. But in January of 2003, the same judge who let her out back a couple years ago lets her out again, saying that she is not a threat to the public at large because, well, her attack was targeted. Okay, she's probably not going to run out and start killing random people. That may be true. Maybe the public at large has nothing to fear from her. But there is a small group of people that she has contact with, and these are not the public at large, and she could totally be a threat to them. Most notably, the Bagbys and, well, little Zachary. In July 2003, Shirley is partaking in a little suggestive fraternizing in the downtown area of St. John's and meets a young man, and they hook up a couple of times. She's up to her old tricks. It's going well until the young man catches wind that Shirley is a dangerous psycho who most likely will be extradited for a murder that she absolutely did commit in the near future. This young man breaks it off with her, and she goes right off her fucking head. She spends the next month harassing him by phone and telling him that, yup, she's pregnant again, and this time it's his. Now, He calls the police on a few occasions and tells them that she's a dangerous lunatic and won't stop calling and threatening him. He refuses to identify himself and doesn't file a formal complaint. That's a problem because the police would never launch an official investigation into her. And all of this stuff would have been against Shirley's bail conditions, and she would have lost custody of little Zachary. Unfortunately, this did not happen. She retains custody, and on August 18th, she proved just how fucked up she could be. The consequences of not locking this cunt up have come full circle and end in the most tragic way possible. Turner picked up a prescription at a local pharmacy and drove to the town of Conception Bay South, which is just outside of St. John's. She ingested what would be most likely a fatal dose of lorazepam and drugged little Zachary's baby formula with it. She attached Zachary's unconscious body to her chest with a sweater and leapt off a fishing wharf into the Atlantic Ocean. And both bodies were found later by a couple of vacationers. Fuck. It was determined that Zachary didn't feel anything due to the medication, so at least he didn't suffer. I mean, that's the closest thing to a bright side that this fucking story has. It's terrible. Turner should have been spending life in prison in some shithole somewhere, while Zachary should have been growing up with the Bagbys. Ideally, this idiot would have never murdered anyone, but that ship had sailed long ago, and now she's only made it 10 times worse. She's a cunt right to the very last second. Her car is found in the vicinity of the house of the young man that she had been harassing for the last month or so. The police concluded that she was probably attempting to frame this guy for, well, the suicide murder thing that she had just done. That did not work. This whole thing, this whole tragic situation has been a big shit stain on Canada's legal system. In 2006, an investigation was conducted, and it was shown that the system was negligent in protecting Zachary from his batshit crazy mom. That's putting it mildly. This tragedy was totally unavoidable, just to protect Shirley's rights. So, in December of 2010, Zachary's law was signed into effect. This law would ensure that dangerous parents are not granted bail when the health and safety of their children are at stake. It's definitely a step in the right direction and a little bit of a bright side. So, the Bagbys can take some solace in the fact that their actions led to an overhaul of our antiquated legal system. I feel so terrible for these guys, losing their son to murder, and then watching the government of another country fuck it up so bad that the murderer got the chance to walk free and do it again to their 1-year-old grandchild. It's fucking unbelievable. Now, David Bagby wrote a book in 2007 called Dance with the Devil, a memoir of murder and loss, and if you're interested in learning more, you can check that out. It's available in print and audiobook in all sorts of places, and the reviews are extremely positive. The Dear Zachary documentary by Kurt Keown is available in full on YouTube and has been reviewed fantastically well and has been named on multiple best documentary lists. And it's a hard watch, but it is a fitting tribute to Andrew and Zachary. Now, someone who hasn't received positive reviews is Turner's former psychiatrist. He was fine, as we said earlier, and eventually left Newfoundland and hid away somewhere else in Canada. Probably had some plastic surgery, shaved his beard, got a new hat, that sort of thing. Now, Andrew's Hospital back in Pennsylvania and the medical school here in St. John's both have scholarships in honor of the victims. The scholarships support students in the field of family medicine, and it is a very fitting way to remember two people whose lives were cut short by one ugly fucking crazy bitch from hell. So, just how batshit crazy was Shirley Turner? Really? Well, here's a few bullet points so you know exactly who they let walk around in polite society. In 1993, she was accused of neglect and child abuse, and the Department of Social Services concluded that she was more or less unfit to look after her children. But nobody bothered to contact Turner herself, and the charges were ultimately dropped the following January. And in 1999, a longtime boyfriend tried to break up with her. So she moved in with him and wouldn't leave. All the while verbally and physically abusing him. He also ran away to Pennsylvania, and she followed him. She attempted suicide outside of his house, and as far as I can tell, he didn't have anything to do with her after that. And when she began dating Andrew, she actually robbed his apartment of his laptop and movie and music collections. He couldn't prove it, and he never pressed charges, but there were no signs of forced entry, and Turner is assumed to be responsible. And in the car that she abandoned out in Conception Bay South after her and poor Zachary jumped off the wharf, she left a used tampon on the car seat for everybody to find after. I'm not sure if that was supposed to fit into the whole frame the old boyfriend thing, but, well, it just goes to prove she doesn't make any fucking sense, and, well, she's fucking gross. So, as you can see, this bitch is all sorts of insane. She should have been locked away years before she got the chance to kill Andrew and Zachary. How the fuck does someone this unstable be allowed to kill again? What a travesty. Fuck Shirley Turner. What a cunt she is. And there you have it. Another unbelievably depressing episode of the worst true crime podcast ever. Evil Done Badly is in the books. If you would like to reach out and suggest future episode topics, we can be reached on Instagram or YouTube at Evil Done Badly, or by email at evildonebadly@gmail.com. Thanks for stopping by. Tell your friends so, well, they can be depressed by us too. My name is Dick, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.